All right, I just want to talk about modifying Ghost Recon. You can still modify the game. Unfortunately, though, it is an old game, so you have to use old software. And a lot of that software won't run in Windows 10, it runs in Windows XP. And there's two ways you can go about doing this. You could build a Windows XP computer, or you can download Oracle VM VirtualBox here and set up a virtual machine. All right, that's what I do. I set up a virtual machine. I think it's a little bit more convenient. So, download the program and go through the setup of it and set up the virtual machine in it. It has a little wizard that you kind of go through to set all that up. And when you get it installed and installed Windows XP and get it all running, you'll basically have Windows inside of Windows. So now you have a digital kind of version of Windows inside of Windows 10. And you can certainly install programs on this and do all kinds of fun stuff in this. Now the trick is, because to modify GR you need those old pieces of software. You have to do this or build that machine. The programs are 3D Studio Max 5.1 and Adobe Photoshop CS2. You can use Adobe Photoshop 7 all the way to CS2 or somewhere in between. So, but CS2 is the last version of Photoshop that allows you to save RSB files, which is the plugin, the file format for Ghost Recon textures. So certainly want to check that out and try to use that if possible. 3D Studio Max 5.1 lets you do characters, weapons, modeling of anything 3D basically, so levels, you name it. Pretty useful program, all right? And once you get those installed, you have to install plugins for them from your Island Thunder's Extra CD. There's going to be RSB plugins for 3D Studio Max, and there's going to be RSB plugins for Photoshop, and then there's going to be the exporter plugin for 3D Studio Max as well. All right, and those are on your Island Thunder's Extra CD, and then you can download them online too. If I find a link for it, I'll put it in the description below. But nonetheless, when you get Max installed, there is some quid pro quo for it. It's actually, it looks nice, perhaps. Yours might come in looking really jaggedy. I changed that. I go to Customize Preferences under Viewport. You can see I'm using a software Z buffer as my main configure driver here. I changed it to 512 and match bitmap close as possible, and it clears up the textures. Otherwise, the textures look really, really horrible, and I can't stand that. So I changed that real quick, and 3D Studio Max 5.1 works now pretty much. You'll notice if the plugins are installed correctly, if you look in this little list here under this little hammer, you click that, and you go down to the bottom, you'll see Red Storm Entertainment, Map Editor, and you can certainly drag that over, drop it somewhere easy to access, click Map Editor, and this is going to have a bunch more options. So when you're building levels or characters or whatever the case may be, you can set them all up appropriately. Setting a model up for the game is called rigging, and here we can see that same UMP as it is rigged. And the trick here is, because I am using software rendering and it's a little bit sluggish, it's a little bit slow, it works fine for weapons or characters. But when it comes to doing levels, it can get really bad. So the only reason I really use 3D Studio Max 5.1 is to rig things together and set them up for the game and export them. And that's it. I do all my actual creation in a program called Blender. And you can see here I created that UMP in Blender. And it's just a much prettier program. It has a lot more features. It's a lot more fun to use. It's newer. It runs on Windows 10 with hardware acceleration. It doesn't have graphics draw issues. So it has features that modders would kill for when they were using 3D Studio Max 5.1. And some of those being like texture paint. I could add in little scratches and stuff. So like right here at the top of this rail, maybe I want a little scratch at the sides, the top sides here. I could just come in and paint some scratches real quick like. Okay, so I highly recommend getting Blender, learning Blender, and having a lot of fun creating stuff with Blender. The trick here is you need to, when you create anything in Blender, you have to export it as a OBJ file. Okay, there's certain settings you use for that, and then when you get to your virtual machine, 3D Studio Max doesn't have OBJ file importer. You have to download plugins for that. It's max2obj.dle, okay, and then obj2max.dli. Those are two plugins, and now it will allow you to import OBJ files. So I can easily just click File, Import, and you can see here I can import OBJ files, wavefront objects. Okay, now I can take anything from Blender and send it right into 3D Studio Max 5.1, and it's not a big deal. You do want to reassign the RSB files, the texture files of Ghost Recon, the RSB file. You want to assign it to your model in 5.1 before you export it. I'll go over more of this in a future tutorial, but just keep that in mind. Also, you'll see that I have this folder here, VM Share Shortcut. This is also in my virtual machine. This is a shared folder, basically, or a network drive, whatever you want to call it, so that the virtual machine can talk to my desktop and vice versa. That way I can just work back and forth. If I need to share any files, like here's the entire Ghost Recon directory, I might want to share some Ghost Recon directory stuff, or if I want to share a weapon, I can just drop it into this folder and it'll do as such. I can also create something else, just call this folder. Oh, folder. If I can type today, Jesus. All right, folder. And you can see in this other folder here that they're connected, right? So they both update pretty frequently. You might have to right click in the virtual machine, click refresh, and sometimes it'll refresh it if it doesn't show up. And that's pretty much it when it comes to modifying Ghost Recon. This is just the tools I use and kind of the way I go about setting them up. There's no right and wrong answers when it comes to any of this. You can use whatever software you want, whether it's Blender or a new version of 3D Studio, or if you want to create new textures in Photoshop or whatever the case may be. You can even use Substance Painters and newer programs like that. It's not going to hurt you none. Just keep in mind that GR, uses diffuse texturing, and there's certain requirements of the game itself when it comes to making maps. So I might make, building inside of this program, but I have to rig it appropriately inside of 3D Studio Max 5.1 to export it to game. When you do create levels in 5.1, though, just remember it's pretty intensive because I'm using a software renderer and I get graphic glitches. If I add more and more and more and make a huge, crazy, stunning map, it almost becomes unusable for me to a certain point. But maybe you'll have different experiences. Some virtual machines allow you to use hardware acceleration. Unfortunately, my hardware acceleration doesn't work, and you may be able to find a way to do that. But I'm okay because normally I just focus on weapons, and I have a lot of fun just playing around creating weapons and whatnot. And maybe you will too. Maybe that's all you want to do. Maybe you just want to do characters. You won't have any major issues using this method anyways. And so, but it is a lot of fun. You can still modify GR here in 2020. It's a good thing, People are still playing the game, still modifying it, and I'm just trying to help make that a little bit easier, and explaining all this. Now, I did make this video like 2 years ago, and I took it down. People were running into problems. Just keep in mind that you may run into any number of problems yourself. I can't help you with all those. I'm just giving you a general guidance on what you can do and how to achieve it. There's just too many variables that come into play. Like I said, if you're tech savvy and you can get through setting up the virtual machine, you shouldn't have too many big problems. A lot of people took this advice when I gave it out a couple years ago, and they ran with it, and they got it set up and working flawlessly. And it's awesome to see other people have success with it, and I'm glad that my little bit of information there helped continue the modding scene for Ghost Recon until where it is today. Hopefully it'll continue on now, as I decided to remake that video, and hope you enjoyed it. So nonetheless, let me know what you think in the comments. All right.